Welcome to the Mondo Agora on the Voluntary Virtues Network, and today we're going to be talking about rehabilitation reprogramming. That's what I'm calling it right now anyway. It's not a new idea, I didn't come up with it, and we're going to go into it a lot more detailed later, but what I do want to say about it right here is it's an alternative to the prison industrial complex we have today and the popular idea of banishment that is kind of infested the libertarian, voluntarist, anarchist community want to do with the bad apples of society. Well, here's an alternative, and I like it. I think it's a great idea. But I have a few announcements I want to get out of the way first. And the first one is there's a series of really cool pamphlets I found, and I had this idea. This is it's based on the Gideons, the people that put the Bibles in hotels. Well, what if somebody were doing that with anarchist literature? I travel a lot for work, spend a lot of time in hotel rooms, and I've been thinking about buying a whole bunch of these pamphlets and just dropping one or two of them in the drawer at all these hotel rooms I'm in. And I encourage anybody out there to do the same thing. I'm looking at some pamphlets from Center for a Stateless Society. They have some really cool ones up there. Check them out. There's also a few libertarian groups that have some pamphlets you could find. I know there's some you can print off. I found somewhere from the Alliance of the Libertarian Left. I don't know exactly what website it was years ago I found it, but I know it was that group that put it out. And something that kind of ties in with today's show is what could be part of that is to send Robert Anton Wilson and maybe Timothy Leary books to state penitentiaries, prisons, that kind of deal, if they accept book donations. But if you can implant the idea into these caged people, send them anarchist literature too. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, even though you could consider both of those also anarchist literature in a sense. And the reason for sending those will make more sense as the show goes on. And finally, also, I'm gearing up to start our series on serial killers again. And you can almost consider this part of that. It's definitely down the crime and punishment path. I do talk about serial killers a little bit in this because it's something that needs to be addressed in our society. And when I'm bringing up rehabilitation, what do you do with somebody like that? That's definitely something that should be thought about. So I hope you enjoy the show, and I'll see you guys on the other side. Peace out. So today we're going to be talking about something I've not really heard a good argument from either side of the spectrum. And this includes statists or libertarians. At least not much good argument from either side. One side, the statist side, they see the world in like this black and white way. You have these laws and you have to break those laws, right? So people to break the laws handed down by the state, they are either thrown in prison or murdered, kidnapped or murdered. Now, some of those people that are murdered totally deserve it. Serial killers and the like. But they also believe that people can be rehabilitated by being stuck in these cages with other animals. And I call them animals in the sense that these are humans that have lost track. They've kind of gone off the rails. They're more of more animals than human, in a sense. A lot of them, except for the non-violent drug offenders, people that have done something non-violent crime, like sort of not paying taxes, in a sense, that kind of thing. They're all thrown in the same place, and people that go there for non-violent crimes come out violent a lot of times. It's just the way it happens. It's not good, but it's the system that has been built in our society, and we have been told it works. And it's obvious that this rehabilitation thing just does not work. So libertarians, anarchists, what are their alternatives? Like, what do they see as different? Some anarchists want to destroy all prisons. No prisons at all. No place to put bad people. Okay. How would that work? A lot of people think that, if somebody is bad for society, then they will just be shunned, right? We shun them, and they will straighten up and act right, or either just leave us alone, right? That'll work. I don't think it will. Recently, I've heard a third alternative, and I never thought about this. Never ever in my life have I thought about this. And it makes sense. I think it could work, at least to an extent, and it's something that should be implemented. And it has been tested. What I'm talking about is something that Robert Anton Wilson brought up in a talk. It was somewhere in the Robert Anton Wilson Explains Everything, or Bob Exposes His Ignorance. I think that's the second subtitle of it. Anyway, the idea isn't even originally his. He's talking about an idea that Timothy Leary had, who is also known as the acid guru. Anyway, the idea is that they give acid to inmates and do some kind of like yogic therapy along with it. Now, Timothy Leary himself, who, if you don't really know anything about the guy, he was an actual doctor of psychology. So, not quite as out there as some people would lead you to believe. He was actually a pretty smart guy. Even though I don't like the way his voice sounds, so I don't really listen to a lot of his talks or anything, I wouldn't fault somebody for doing so. Right? Anyway, he actually did these experiments, and I don't know, it must have been like the 60s, I suppose, where he administered LSD to inmates, did this kind of yogic therapy with them, and lo and behold, the ones that were released, 80% of them were able to stay outside of prison. And you're like, okay, well, 20% of them still ended up back in prison. Isn't that the general statistic anyway? And the answer is no. It's actually the opposite of the general statistic. The general statistic is 80% of people that go to prison end up back in prison. And Timothy Leary was able to reverse this, completely reverse it. He did a follow-up study about 10 years later to see how many of those were still in prison and how many of them were able to stay out in society. And 80% of them, 80% of the people that participated in the study were still out. And, several decades after he died, someone else did a follow-up study and found the same numbers to be accurate. Now, this isn't a very large-scale study. This is a small group of people that this one guy did a small study with. And somebody else followed up years later just by checking them. And that's about all the scientific evidence there is out there for this. Because who put a kibosh to this whole thing? The federal government is definitely not going to let people give LSD to inmates anymore. That is not going to happen. But it worked. According to this small group, it definitely warrants more study, right? Now, the basic idea of this is that these people were able to reprogram themselves. And this is a little bit different than brainwashing somebody. You're not trying to convince them to do something or to be a certain way. You're letting someone choose to be that way. The idea is that something has went wrong inside them in the past. Something has influenced them in such a way that they turned out a certain way. And it's like a switch inside you. They give these people this mind-altering drug, lets them kind of dive into themselves, and they're able to go in and flick that switch. Change their personality just enough that they don't need whatever it was that put them there in the first place. They don't have to steal anymore. They realize that stealing hurts somebody else or something. They're able to connect more with that person or those people. Now, what if we, as libertarians, were able to implement this kind of thing? We can make real changes. Not this, we can just reduce the prison industrial complex. We can actually change the whole fundamental way of rehabilitating these people. And actually rehabilitate, not just throwing them in a cage where they come out much worse. Now, to me, that makes perfect sense. It seems like it's something that we should have been trying for several decades. Once we come across this kind of thing, it's something we should jump right on board. So I know what you're all thinking. Brainwashing has been done before by the U.S. government, especially when you're thinking about MK Ultra, something like that. And not to mention all the other governments that have tampered in this domain, mainly Russia during the Cold War. Who knows if they're still doing? They probably are. But there's a huge difference there. There's a big difference between, trying to rehabilitate yourself and someone secretly trying to program you. I mean, there's a difference between brainwashing and what I'm just going to call reprogramming yourself, because I have no other word for it, really.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. It's the difference between rape and sex, really. As long as it's done voluntarily, you know, somebody's like, hey, I have a problem. I don't know what it is. Can I try this therapy to see if I can correct the imbalance in myself? There's nothing wrong with that. At least how I see it. And it falls perfectly in line with the whole voluntaryist thing. And if it can be done voluntarily, then it can be part of a sentencing procedure. You know, if somebody is a known thief in a community and they're caught red-handed stealing a car, and they've got somebody's electronics or something in the back of it as well, you know, and this person's been caught 4 or 5 times doing this, the community can go, okay, look, we know you did it, you know, you did the trial and everything, you proved 100% you did everything that we said, we got video footage, witnesses, photos, footprints, handprints, everything, you know, we absolutely 100% know it's you that did this thing, and we're going to give you an option. Okay? Here's the option. Either you can go into we call it a rehab clinic, rehabilitation clinic, for repeat criminal offenders. And by criminal, I mean actual crime, not as in the victimless crimes that the governments usually throw in a cage, but an actual criminal breaking of natural human laws. Okay, so they've been charged, whatever, and they're given the option to either go into rehabilitation, and that's not to drive around in a little car while a giant monster truck is trying to run you over, like in Idiosyncrasy. This would be reprogramming clinic, maybe we can call it that, where you go and you go through this therapy about trying to fix yourself from the inside. Or you can be banished from the community. We don't want you here if you're going to be like this. This is your last shot. Our last shot is to see if you can fix yourself, because there's something obviously wrong with you. You can't stay in our community, so you either try to fix yourself or you leave. Now, would this work on a psychopath, a murderer, someone that is, you know, serial killer, as our series has been on serial killers in the past? And actually, I'm gearing up to start that again. You can almost consider this part of that series, because this is definitely on the crime and punishment path, right? So, what to do about somebody like that? You know, what if there is a Ted Bundy in a libertarian community and they get caught, right? So, by the way, go back and listen to my Ted Bundy podcast, and you will realize why a libertarian community will catch a predator like that way faster than the police did. Anyway, okay, so someone has been caught eating somebody else, right? Horrific crime, terrible person. Would this rehabilitation, reprogramming therapy work on somebody like that? Now, what I would say is maybe. It's possible that it could work. But does that even matter? I mean, if somebody has done something that heinous, I still think there's an argument for the death penalty, even in a voluntarist society. I know, there's no retribution in that, If you were the family of a loved one that got murdered, and I've been there, I've been there, would you want the murderer as like the family slave or something? You wouldn't. I'm telling you, you would not. You would not want to be around that person. I don't think it should be up to the state, though. The community should try the person, whatever community they're in. And if the person is found guilty of something that horrific, maybe turn them over to the family to do whatever they want with them, or the families. That's the only kind of retribution someone could really get in a situation like that. It's not like a car stereo stolen, where somebody's come in and stole somebody's nice, fancy, real silverware. This is somebody that has, raped and murdered somebody's daughter. What are you going to do with them? I think, if it's obvious that they did it, it's been proven in the courts of the society that you're living in at the time. Turn them over to the family. Let the family do whatever they want with them. And that person's life is over. Essentially, they forfeited their life whenever they did whatever it was they did that was so terrible. And I'm not arguing that people that are involved in accidental manslaughter cases should be turned over and tortured by the person's family. I'm not saying that. I think the punishment should fit the crime. Popular vernacular of that saying there. If the person deserves a chance to be rehabilitated, then they should have the opportunity, not thrown in a cage to rot and come out worse than they went in. We've taken non-violent offenders, thrown them in these little cement boxes for years, and they're coming out gang members, murderers. And a lot of these people shouldn't be there in the first place. And the ones that kind of do have to be separated from society or fixed, there's actually a chance to do that. And not just a threatened punishment system that we live in today. There's actually a chance to fix what might be wrong with somebody. And that's something that the prison system doesn't see. They don't see these people as having problems. They treat them like children. Time out. You've done something bad. It's time for your time out. Go into the corner. You stay there. Don't talk. Don't play. No dessert for you. You know what I'm saying? I think that we really should give the psychedelics a chance in our society. It's something that's been shunned. People look at mushrooms as bad of a drug as heroin in a lot of cases. And it's not. People don't overdose on mushrooms. They take them, try to hide from society, and fall out of a window because they're trying to stay away from people. I'm not saying people should go out and just start doing mushrooms or anything like that. I'm saying by taking something that could be very useful to our society, our culture, our people, and taking it and making it legal is terrible. We're destroying ourselves. And I think one way to correct the prison industrial complex that we have today is to implement this hallucinogenic program in the quote-unquote prison system, to completely alter it. You know, we really need to abolish the prisons for hire kind of thing. You know, where people are getting paid money to throw other people in prison, or people are getting paid money to have as many people in prison as they could. There's been judges caught red-handed taking money from prisons to put people in prison. Is that okay? That's awful. And what would you do with that person? What would you do with the judge in a voluntarist society that has been caught doing something like that? They put, 200 people in these cement boxes that doesn't deserve to be there for money. What kind of psychopath is that? Could they be rehabilitated with this reprogramming yogic practice thing? Is it possible? Would you want them to be? I don't know. Think about that. Thanks for listening, guys.